I would like to just give some explanation for those who care to listen before it is too late. And thereafter hold my peace. I want to assure you by the grace of God that I'm flying no man's kite. As the Lord lives, I'm not a paid piper of anybody. God is witness. And I will answer up to him in the days to come. But I'm responsible to make things plain, to you especially, and to those who truly care about us. So I like to call this sequel to the State of the Nation broadcast. And for a theme, I've chosen the title today, The Gathering Storm, An Avoidable Shipwreck, How to Avoid Catastrophic Euroclydon, Part 2. Since last Sunday, social, print, and electronic media have been awash with our State of the Nation broadcast. I thank everyone for their feedback, those who deemed our analysis and propositions reasonable, those who lumped us with so-called supporters of President Jonathan and the PDP, and those who vehemently oppose or simply disagree with our contributions. And of course, those who are torn between opinions. I thank you all. I recognize that such people are here also. Regardless of the tide of public opinion, my primary concern is to remain a conscientious servant of God and to deliver his message to my nation, regardless of whose ox is girded, even at the risk of being misunderstood. The character of those who may dwell with the Lord is spelled out in his word, and it is in their company I opt to remain. Please turn your Bible with me to Psalm 15. I'll read from verse 1 to 5. Psalm 15, 1 to 5. Very direct question, similar to Psalm 24. Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle, who may dwell in your holy hill? He who walks uprightly and walks righteousness and speaks the truth in his heart. He who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor does he take up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but he honors those who fear the Lord. He who swears to his own heart and does not change. He who does not put out his money at usury, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. He who does things shall never be moved. Tell your neighbor, no shaking. I can't hear you. With this scriptural foundation, let me state here and now that I am a hardcore loyalist. But my loyalty is not blind. It has two eyes focused primarily on God's honor. As I said last Sunday, it is clear, except to the mischief makers, where my loyalties lie. But this broadcast is not about political endorsements. It's about alerting the nation of the storms ahead. If you must know, I said last Sunday, my political loyalty lies with General Buhari, and I cannot claim not to know the issues surrounding the APC primary and the processes that led to this election. of his current running mate. I got a text question from the press in Germany. They asked me the question, if they have featured the same presidential candidate, why did they drop you? I responded, fair is fair. Nobody dropped me. I volunteered to leave the stage long before now. I did say that in private to General Buhari and in public to those who care to listen. Besides, there were 3 or 4 legacy parties. In a merger situation, one party cannot produce both the president and the vice president, or the presidential candidate and the vice presidential candidate. Nobody dropped me. An actor quits the stage when the ovation is loudest. Therefore, it is God and God alone I look up to for my vindication, even as friends become suspicious of my motives and enemies themselves pretend to be friends. This broadcast about the counsel of the Most High, who rules in the affairs of men and gives rulership to whoever he wills. Therefore, while charting this course, I choose to find strong solace in the words of Apostle Paul, as recorded in Galatians chapter 1, verse 10. He reads, and I quote, Galatians 1:10, for do I now persuade men, O God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I still pleased men, I will not be a bondservant of Christ. I like the New Living Translation. It throws more light. Listen to it. Galatians 1:10, the New Living Translation. Obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. To be candid, last Sunday's broadcast, though abruptly truncated by Channels Television, has yielded some positive results, especially from government officials, perhaps due to widespread media publicity and the Guardian newspaper's gracious 5-page reproduction of the speech this past week. The Guardian newspaper dedicated 5 pages, 2 pages on one day, 2 days after, 3 full pages, so that everyone could at least sit down and read and think before they would talk. The positive developments include, number 1, Professor Jerry Garner's explanation for the humongous campaign donations were declared illegal in that speech. He has now explained the donations will be primarily expended on the PDP's main secretariat in Abuja, and the balance will be devoted to other PDP projects. Daily Trust, January 6, 2015. 21 billion appeal fund now for Jonathan's campaign. At least we are getting explanation. So thank God for the broadcast. Can I hear amen? Number 2, the DSS sudden explanation on primetime TV for their invasion of the APC secretariat. Nothing was heard from them since that invasion until the broadcast. We await the prosecution of culprits if they want us to take them seriously. Number 3, the federal government's meeting with the service chiefs and governors of Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe states, where they discussed the security situation, ostensibly with a view to determining the feasibility of holding February elections in their Boko Haram invested states. Daily Trust, January 7, 2015, Jonathan meets Northeast governors and service chiefs. Number 4, the pressure on INEC by all and sundry, including the government, for the hopefully effective last-minute distribution of PVCs, which was scheduled to commence in 2 of the 27 local government areas in Borno between yesterday, January 10, and Thursday, January 15, 2015. But Punch January 9, 2015 says, INEC won't distribute PVC in 25 Borno local government areas. So those 25 local governments are disenfranchised. These efforts are duly noted. However, having read some of the comments generated so far by our State of the Nation speech, and having heard the comments of those I imagine will know better, I cannot but agree that the mind is like stomach. It is not how much you put into it that counts, but how much it digests. Anyone who in the past week did not listen to or read the speech in its entirety may have come to the conclusion that the whole address was about election postponement and a transitional government without any justification whatsoever. It appears that both sides of the divide, that is, those in power, the incumbents, and those who want to chase them out and take over power, have come to the conclusion that any call for caution or any other constitutional alternative to their rapid moves to retain or take over power must be resisted at all costs, regardless of the attendant consequences. Indeed, as Voltaire said, many are destined to reason wrongly, some not to reason at all, and others to persecute those who reason. Let me, for the sake of those who are yet to read the full text of last Sunday's speech, clearly state my unambiguous submission as regards election postponement as stated on page 23 of the speech. Quote, I submit that if the president considers that a part of the federation will be disenfranchised by reason of the Boko Haram plague, a postponement of election may not be out of place. Can I read it again? I didn't change anything. It's all over the world. It's on the internet. Page 23 of that speech reads, and I quote, I submit that if the president considers that a part of the federation will be disenfranchised by reason of the Boko Haram plague, a postponement of the election may not be out of place. I would have thought that common sense will see the fairness in that submission, but those who think otherwise only see the unintended mandatory injunction in the sentence compelling the president to postpone the election. Before we go any further today, let me point out the major difference between the prudent and the simpleton. The prudent and the simpleton. The Bible states in Proverbs 22:3, Proverbs chapter 22 verse 3, a prudent man foresees evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. The New Living Translation throws more light on this. It reads, and I quote, a prudent person foresees danger and takes precaution. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. The summary of all that we said in last Sunday's broadcast is simply this. Let's take precautions to avoid danger. And there are so many undertones and undercurrents that the citizens of our nation are not aware of, but politicians know what they're doing. There are two things that have become a dangerous bait to those who must get power at all costs and those who are fighting not to lose it. About 96 oil wells will be free for allocation. They're about to be free. So whoever occupies the seat will have to deal with those free oil wells. That's number one. Number two, The next year after the election, census is about to be conducted. And since we use population figures to determine how to share revenue, some people are hell-bent to ensure that we do not have an accurate census. These are the issues that are underneath, propelling men to go at all costs to lay hold of power before the shenanigans of past years are exposed. This brings me to the critical question in today's message. Who is afraid of a transitional government? By way of introduction, transitional governments are temporary political arrangements set up to pilot the affairs of a state that is ridden with conflict, instability, or constitutional crisis towards a stable, consensually agreed constitutional order. In the course of the political history of Liberia, Burundi, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kenya, Nepal, Iraq, and Afghanistan, power-sharing transitional governments became veritable tools for post-conflict demobilization and integration. Hence, by their nature, please listen again before you jump into different conclusions. Hence, by their nature, most transitional governmental arrangements are post-conflict measures which attempt to find a compromise between or among opposing claimants to power. In some cases, they are necessitated by the existence of a power vacuum brought about by a constitutional lacuna after an unprecedented or unanticipated collapse of a legitimate government. Transitional governments were put in place after people's uprisings toppled the dictatorships in other African countries, including Egypt and Libya, in the phenomenon known as the Arab Spring. This post-crisis nature of transitional governments explains the antagonism to what might call for a possible transitional government at this pre-storm stage of our current national voyage. The seeming calm, albeit uneasy, and the relative peace, particularly in the South. Our two presidential candidates did their flag off in the South. None of them considered Borno State, or neither of them. The seeming calm, albeit uneasy, and the relative peace, particularly in the South, render unwelcome any counsel to winter in fair havens, that is, to forestall a major disaster, if need be, by constitutionally suspending elections and seeking to address foundational flaws that constitute the hotbed of socio-political upheavals, especially around election periods. Such an antagonistic response is further informed by an optimistic appraisal of the transition process, especially by political parties and their supporters and sympathizers who are convinced of victory in the upcoming presidential polls. This disposition is no different from the views held by the majority, the ship owner, and the helmsman in the Alexandrian ship boarded by Paul in Acts 27. It is a disposition that was certainly expected, and we did say so. I will not belabor the need for a transitional government at this time, as that was sufficiently elaborated on last week. As I stated then, he who has ears, let him hear. However, it is necessary to address the misconceptions surrounding my call for a transitional government and to further buttress the workability of same. I intend to do so in this message or speech on 8 grounds. How many grounds? I can't hear you. Tap your neighbor, say, this is not a time to sleep. 8 ground. Ground number 1, misconceptions about the proposal for interim government and the parallel with the so-called Shipwreck experiment. In an article titled Interim Government, a blank check to anarchy, written by one of the editorial board members of the Nation newspaper and published in the Nation on Monday, January 5, 2015, my proposal for a transitional government was parallel with the interim government asked by General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida in 1993 when he decided to step aside after annulling the June 12, 1993 elections. Choosing to ignore the portions where the author attacked my person and not the argument, I appreciate the depth of intellect displayed in the said publication, as well as the reference to history in that critical analysis of my proposal. Nevertheless, I must elucidate the baselessness of such comparison as the author fails to take the following into consideration. A. The interim government headed by Chief Ernest Shoneko was contrived by a military government that was not guided by any constitutional framework. In its capricious tendencies, that regime created a never-ending transitional program, allowed the people to express their mandate on the basis of that transitional program, and stole that mandate from the people. Even though the transitional program had guidelines, they were subject to the caprices of the military. In contrast, the nation is currently governed under the framework of the 1999 Constitution. When the letter and spirit of the Constitution are considered without bias, and the constitutional provision in Section 135 is taken into consideration in view of the intentions of its framers and against the backdrop of the state of the nation, we will find a constitutional window for the proposals made for a postponement of the elections and the institution of a transitional government. Details of this will be presented as and when needed, because you will need it that day. B. The Shoneko experiment took place after elections. The interim government of 1993 was set in place as an illegal substitute to the people's mandate as expressed through election results. Conversely, the currently proposed transitional government is to be established before elections on constitutional foundations to help steer the shape of state to a harbor suitable for elections. That's the difference for those who can think. It is not worthy that in an aforementioned article, the author states anything that tampers with the people's mandate is a coup against the Constitution and the popular will. Whereas such post-election tampering with a mandate was exactly what happened in 1933, I am proposing a reasonable way to avert post-election turbulence that could threaten our very existence as a nation.